Now that's what I call high quality H2O.
Hey guys, I want to talk about how switching to natural sanitation can save your health. You see that we say it saves your health, money, and environment. This is about how specifically it saves your health. So here you'll see I got a little stack of papers. First, I want to let you know that there is so much information online that I just got a few things. I just got a few things right here. So this is from the CDC, right here. Chlorine is a toxic gas with corrosive properties. It's also been used as a chemical warfare choking agent. At the lowest levels at which humans can smell chlorine and notice its irritant properties, generally provides sufficient warning for exposure. However, chronic exposure to chlorine causes adaptation of the sense of smell and tolerance to its irritant effects. So the longer you're around chlorine, the more you become tolerant to it. And because of this, persons with a history of prolonged exposure lose the ability to identify when they are being exposed to chlorine. Straight from the CDC. Now, this is very interesting, guys. I actually just noticed this this time that I was reading this time reading through, because I've read through this several times before. This time reading through, this is the first time I picked up on this. It says that for one of the methods of dissemination for chlorine, it says that you can disseminate chlorine through water. And here's what it says right here, guys. CDC, black and white. Chlorine can be used to contaminate water. That's the word it uses. That's all it says for water. Method of dissemination for chlorine for water is chlorine can be used to contaminate water. It doesn't say sanitize. I just want to point that out. It says contaminate. When we're using chlorine to sanitize our pools, we are contaminating the water with a toxic poison, according to the CDC. Okay, all right, let's keep going. I'm going to try to keep this short, but this is the most important section, so it's probably going to be the longest of the videos of health, money, and environment. So it's the most important though, guys. This is your health. We're talking about your health. We're talking about your life, your well-being. This is the most important. Nothing's more important here. Chemical dangers, according to the CDC. In water, chlorine is a strong acid, corrosive, and an oxidizer that forms hydrochloric acid and hypochlorous acid. Chlorine attacks plastic, rubber, coatings, and many metals in the presence of water. It goes on to say chlorine forms halides with all elements except helium, neon, and argon. Whenever you understand what halides are, this is important because it means that it's forming halides in your body. Okay, let's go to the next thing. I don't want to get caught up too long on anything because there's so much. Okay, respiratory symptoms may be immediate or delayed for several hours or days after exposure to chlorine. Symptoms generally resolve within 6 hours after mild exposure, but may continue for several days after severe exposure, and deterioration may continue for several hours. Effects of short-term, CDC, effects of short-term, less than 8 hours of exposure here, it says. Chlorine, it is severely irritating on contact with moist tissues, such as the eyes, skin, nose, throat, and upper respiratory tract. At low concentrations, chlorine can cause eye and nose irritation, sore throat, and cough. At high exposure levels, irritation of the upper respiratory tract and accumulation of fluid in the lungs, known as pulmonary edema, contribute to a sensation of choking. Suffocation is the characteristic initial complaint of patients or victims exposed to chlorine, chlorine poisoning. Eye exposure. Mild to moderate eye exposure will cause burning discomfort, spasmodic blinking, or involuntary closing of the eyelids, redness, inflation of the eye's membranes, and tear production. Severe eye exposure will cause corneal burns leading to cell death, necrosis, and tissue damage, ulcerations. Inhalation exposure. Lung injury may progress over hours to days. Mild to moderate, that is exposure, inhalation exposure. You can have rapid onset of eye, nose, and throat irritation, immediate coughing spasms and choking sensation, retching and vomiting, and stomach contents that smell like chlorine. Hoarseness or complete loss of voice is often seen. High-pitched sound caused by narrowing of the upper airway. Severe chest discomfort. Narrowing of the lower airway is an early and prominent effect of exposure. Patients describe the sensation of feeling smothered or suffocated. So obviously, chlorine's not very good on your lungs. Skin exposure. Mild to moderate skin exposure of chlorine cause irritation, burning pain, inflammation, and blisters. Severe exposure causes severe chemical burns leading to cell death, again, necrosis, and tissue damage. All right, from the CDC, guys, I think that's all I have from this one. Oh, I wanted to note this. On the CDC's website, it says the antidote for chlorine exposure. There is no antidote for chlorine toxicity. Your body just gets over it. Or does it? I don't know. Here's some long-term implications. Delayed effects of exposure, right here. Exposure to chlorine may cause reactive airways dysfunction syndrome, RADS, R-A-D-S, a chemical irritant-induced type of asthma. Effects of chronic or repeated exposure to chlorine. Chronic exposure to chlorine, usually in the workplace, may cause erosion of the teeth. Multiple exposures to chlorine have produced flu-like symptoms and high risk of developing reactive airway dysfunction syndrome, again, RADS. Chlorine exposure may result in chronic inflammation of the large airways, bronchitis. It's not good for your lungs at all, guys. It's not good for anything, but it's not good for your lungs at all. CDC, right there, CDC. Okay, let me set this over here so it doesn't blow away. Amy Myers, MD. Amy Myers, MD. Thyroid. This is about your thyroid. How chlorine impacts your thyroid function. Because the highest concentration of iodine in your body is in your thyroid gland, and iodine is so important for thyroid hormone production, your body is incredibly efficient at absorbing and storing iodine in the thyroid. Unfortunately, your thyroid isn't perfect at telling the difference between iodine and other substances with very similar chemical structures. Iodine is a part of the halogen family, which includes chlorine as well as fluorine and bromine. Halogens all fall into the same column of the periodic element, meaning they have similar properties. And chlorine is similar enough to iodine that your thyroid will absorb it and store it in place of iodine, effectively displacing iodine. Your skin is your biggest organ, and it absorbs many of the chemicals it comes into contact with. So every time you swim in a chlorinated pool and take a bath or a shower, your skin absorbs chlorine, allowing it to be taken up and stored in your thyroid. Just because chlorine looks like iodine doesn't mean it can be used to make thyroid hormone. So if chlorine is displacing iodine, your ability to produce thyroid hormone is reduced. And this can lead to hypothyroidism. The higher the concentration of chlorine you have in your body and the lower your iodine levels are, the more likely it is that your thyroid function will be negatively impacted. Small chlorine exposure builds with time. Of course, the amount of chlorine you're exposed to each time is very small, but research has shown that the cumulative effects of this exposure over time can have serious impacts on your health. That's what this is all about, guys. Saving your health. Let's save your health. Let's save your thyroid. I don't have a thyroid anymore. I don't know if you can see the scar on my neck. My thyroid was removed. I don't have one. That's what started all of this, guys. I'll do a really cool video one of these days explaining all this to you. That's what started all of this. I lost my thyroid, and it took me down this journey of finding a better, natural, healthier way to sanitize pools. I don't want you guys to have thyroid problems, health problems. There's a lot of issues that come along with having a dysfunctional thyroid or not having one at all. So I'm trying to save you guys from it, okay? Here's another one. This was a newer one. Yeah, this was a newer one from 2022 from the Food Revolution Network. I spilled a little coffee on it. I don't know if you can see that or not, whatever. What are the harmful effects of chlorine for you and your family? The shadow side of chlorinated water is becoming more apparent all the time. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, Americans now consume 300 to 600 times the amount of chlorine that is safe to ingest. Why is chlorine in drinking water dangerous? Because when chlorine mixes with even minute